text neck has been, I think, firmly put to bed. It's not a thing. A new study has been released in December 2025, as of recording this in January 2026. That's around 1 month ago. It was a 12-month longitudinal study with over 400 participants. About 390 of them completed the study, and it found no association between neck posture when using a smartphone and neck pain over the ensuing 1-year period. So we're going to dive into that study and look at the broader literature on neck alignment, neck loading, and neck pain, and think about how it applies to Pilates specifically. So when I was trained up, and very likely, dear listener, same for you, when you were trained up, you were probably taught that neutral cervical or neck alignment is the default safe position. And this manifests in safety cues and protocols like make sure you always put the headrest down on your reformer when you're doing shoulder bridge, never over flex the neck. And what I was taught, it's actually one of the principles of Stop Pilates, that when you do a back bend, that the cervical, or a forward bend, that the cervical spine, which is capable of about 90 degrees of extension in most people, should follow the line of the thoracic spine, which is capable of about 10 degrees of extension in most people. So we were really taught, probably most of us, to avoid the end ranges of the neck and specifically to avoid them under load, which is kind of weird considering that Joseph Pilates' instructions in his book Return to Life Through Contrology explicitly say that the chin should be on the chest in a lot of the flexion-based exercises. And in the extension-based exercises like Swan Dive, he specifically says, look up at the ceiling, your neck should be extended as far as possible. So we were taught that neutral cervical alignment is a default safe position. Don't put your headrest up in shoulder bridge. We're also taught, many of us, to avoid, quote, overusing the, quote, bad neck muscles, the sternocleidomastoids, those sort of muscles down the side and front of your neck here, the upper trapezius, and that we should, avoid overusing those muscles, and that we should instead focus on using the deep neck flexors, which you can't see from the outside. They're located on the very front, deep inside the neck, the very front of the vertebral bodies, in front of the anterior longitudinal ligament. And they are the, quote, good muscles of the neck. And essentially that the neck is treated as fragile and to be protected. Now, of course, relatively speaking, the neck is comparatively fragile and very precious because our spinal cord, our vertebral arteries that feed the brain all go through there. So obviously it's very important not to, not to catastrophically injure your neck. But I think there's very clear evidence that we way overvalue avoiding load and avoiding end positions, and actually that causes a detriment. That actually is harmful to our clients to do that. All right, so the first thing I want to point out here in terms of thinking about the way we think about the neck in Pilates is that there are two double standards in effect. The first double standard is around the way we treat the neck in different contexts. And the second double standard is about how we treat the neck versus how we treat many other joints in the body. So the first one is how we treat the neck in different contexts. So, I'm sure, dear listener, that you've seen the graphic that has the person sitting up straight, then with their neck bent, forwards, and then a little bit more forwards, and a little bit more forwards until the chin is resting on the chest. And there's like some kind of amount of force or weight or load associated with it. So, when the head's bent fully forward and the chin's on the chest, the head is like 4 times heavier or something. I don't know the number, but whatever. I'm sure you've seen it. And that is, by implication, is a, quote, bad thing. So loading the neck in flexion whilst sitting, i.e., the way that you look down at your phone when you're scrolling, is bad because it loads the neck. But so when when your head's parallel to when your neck's parallel to the floor, the head weighs 4 times what, I can't remember what the actual number is, but a lot, right? And yet when we're in a plank or even just plain old vanilla quadruped position, hands and knees on the box or on the floor or on the reformer carriage, the neck is at 90 degrees to gravity, like the exact same loads are on the neck in that position as when your neck is flexed 90 degrees when you're upright. So the exact same load in that plank exercise or in quadruped is considered absolutely fine. But when we're sitting with our head flexed forward, that's somehow bad. So the same load is considered, good or bad in different situations. And same with different, there are multiple exercises where we move our neck or load our neck in different positions and where it's considered fine and safe and good. But then when we do it in other exercises, it's considered, bad or to be avoided. For example, in the roll-up, you load the neck in flexion, you load the sternocleidomastoids. That is considered to be a fine exercise. It is a fine exercise. Objectively, it's a fine exercise. The second double standard is the way that we treat the neck differently to not every other joint, but most of the other joints in the body. So we load Pilates and any form of resistance training. Pilates, is a form of resistance training. It also involves flexibility training. It also involves movement skill training. So strength, flexibility, and skill are the three core elements that we work on in Pilates. And they're the same elements that we work on in every other form of training, if it's a well-balanced form of training. We just do it a little bit differently in Pilates. And so we take it for granted that we will move joints through range of motion under load in most other joints in the body. For example, how would you strengthen someone's biceps? Well, you'd give them something to hold in their hand that involves some load, like a spring or a band or a weight or something. And then you would move that joint through range under load. And what range would you go through? You'd straighten the elbow all the way down, and then you'd flex the elbow all the way up. Like you'd take it through full extension to full flexion. And we just treat that as a complete matter of course. How do you strengthen and stretch the calf muscles? We do it every session, most of us, when we teach reformer, and you do your lift and lower on the foot bar, at the end of your footwork sequence, where you have the balls of your feet on the bar, your legs are in parallel, and feet are close together, and you let your heels stretch under the bar. So you go into deep dorsiflexion, and then you lift up as high as you can, both of your heels, and you go into your maximum plantar flexion. And we just repeat that, and we do reps, and it's under load. We're dorsiflexing and plantar flexing. We're going through full range in the calf muscle. And nobody thinks twice about, that's dangerous for the ankle. And I could add so many more examples, the triceps, the leg curls, knee extensions. There are so many movements that we just completely take it for granted that moving a joint through its full range under load is a good thing. And yet, when it comes to the neck, we suddenly think it's bad. We suddenly think, don't flex your neck under load. And if I take that and take the word neck and substitute it for elbow, don't flex your elbow under load. Don't flex your knee under load. Don't flex your hip under load. It sounds ridiculous. Don't flex your shoulder under load. It sounds ridiculous. Well, the neck is just bones, ligaments, joint capsules, tendons, muscles, fascia, exactly the same components as your elbow, your hip, your knee, your ankle. And just like all of those other structures, your neck, the tissues respond to progressive load over time by becoming stronger. And that is, in fact, what exercise is. It's the deliberate, structured application of load to body tissues to stimulate a response. And the response is increasing strength and /or flexibility. So the third, paradox there is that if we think of the neck as fragile, and we think of it as to be protected, well, paradoxically, the best protection is to become less fragile. That seems kind of self-evident to me. And how do you make any body part less fragile? Well, think about a frail resident of an assisted care facility, someone in their 90s with, imagine no muscle tone, thighs you could put a finger and a thumb around. No muscle tone. And then think of a 26-year-old rugby player, a Samoan rugby player, legs thick as tree trunks, a neck as thick as most people's torsos, right? Which one of those people is more fragile? And why is the elderly person more fragile? Not because they're elderly, there's nothing inherent in age that makes you fragile. It's the things that accompany age that make you more fragile. You lose bone density, you lose muscle mass, you lose tissue strength, because the tissues become smaller. And why do they become smaller? Well, it's partly hormonal, but it's mainly disuse. We don't load tissues as we get older. And so the way to make somebody less fragile is to systematically and deliberately load their tissues over time to stimulate them to become more massive and stronger. I mean, how do you improve someone's bone density? How do you improve their muscle strength? How do you improve their ligament and tendon strength and their joint health? You load those structures systematically over time. And yet we apply the opposite logic to the neck. We avoid loading it. We avoid putting it through range of motion, which just is the exact opposite of what we know from basic physiology. I mean, imagine if somebody came into your Pilates class and said, I've got really weak biceps. And then, would you say like, oh, well, okay, great. Well, we'll make sure we avoid loading your biceps for the rest of the time, forever now. It's like, well, that's illogical. That doesn't make sense. You wouldn't say that, presumably. And so if somebody comes in and says, I've got a very weak neck, why would you say, well, great, we'll avoid loading your neck forever now? Like if someone came in and said, I've got weak biceps, you would say like, okay, great, no worries. We'll start with a lightweight and we'll strengthen up your biceps over time. Pretty soon, you won't have weak biceps. You'll have strong biceps. The neck is no different. Start with a lightweight, build it up over time. Bam, stronger neck. Now you don't have a weak neck. And so why is it important, right? Why is it important to do this? Well, when we, and coming to the study, the 2025 study and what they found. So the study was called Cervical Flexion Posture During Smartphone Use Was Not a Risk Factor for Neck Pain, but Low Sleep Quality and Insufficient Levels of Physical Activity were, a longitudinal investigation by Correia et al. 2025 in the Brazilian Journal of Physical Therapy. And I'll link to all the studies I'm going to mention here in the show notes. So basically what they did in this study was they got like about 430 something people, 457 volunteers, male and female, between 18 and 65 years old, without neck pain. And they objectively assessed their neck posture in sitting and in standing whilst using a smartphone. So they used an inclinometer, which is something that measures the angle of the neck. And then they followed them for a year and asked them to asked them about their neck pain. And what they found was something like 390 something people finished. 396 people completed the 1 year follow-up, and neck pain was reported by 10% of participants. I'm just going to read from the result here. Quote, multiple logistic regression analysis showed that text neck did not increase the chance of neck pain, standing or sitting, or the frequency of neck pain, sitting or standing, after baseline. However, low sleep quality and insufficient level of physical activity increased the chance of neck pain. Now, low sleep quality had an odds ratio of 1.76. What that means is people who reported that they had low sleep quality were 1.76 times more likely, so almost double as likely to experience neck pain compared to people who didn't report poor sleep quality. And insufficient level of physical activity, which they defined as not meeting the physical activity guidelines, had an odds ratio of 2.41, almost 2.5 times more likely to experience neck pain. So people who don't sleep well and don't exercise are way more likely, and I don't know what the combination was of people who had both of those things, what their odds ratio was, but they're at least 2.5 times more likely, if they had both of those things, to experience neck pain. So what is that, what do we draw from that? What can we draw from that? Well, firstly, text neck is just not a predictor of future neck pain. So this is a well-designed, prospective, longitudinal study design. So we looked at text neck at baseline and then looked at text neck being the neck posture at baseline, and then looked at neck pain over the subsequent year. So this study is quite well designed to illuminate causality or lack of causality. And we see zero correlation. Like they've literally found no correlation between the neck posture and people's neck pain or absence of neck pain. So what we can see from this study is a pretty large cohort, is that there just was not a correlation between text neck and neck pain. So text neck does not cause neck pain. Now, is this 100% certain? No, you can never be 100% certain, and I'll leave my mind open for any future evidence that might emerge. But given the totality of evidence that we currently have, in my mind, it seems like extremely unlikely that text neck does, in fact, cause neck pain. And when we take the other evidence that we have in this area, we find there was a 2023 systematic review in the Journal of Physical Therapy that found moderate certainty evidence that neck strengthening reduces the incidence of future neck pain. So having a, and that aligns, right, with what they just found in this 2025 paper, where low physical activity increases your chance of neck pain. Well, doing neck exercises decreases your chance of neck pain. And for a lot of us, intuitively that kind of, I'm sure, I imagine, makes a lot of sense, right? If you're fitter and stronger, you're more resilient. And they also have a slightly older review from 2017 by Chen et al., which was a systematic review and meta-analysis of workplace interventions for neck pain. And they found that compared with ergonomics, stretching, breaks, postural interventions, the most effective intervention to reduce and prevent neck pain was targeted neck and shoulder strengthening. So targeting and strengthening the neck actually works best of anything we know, as well as getting a good night's sleep, to decrease the incidence of neck pain. So when we excessively protect our clients from loading their neck or moving the neck through range, when we avoid loading the neck, we actually are doing our clients a disservice. We are increasing their future odds of neck pain. When we focus excessively on alignment and think that that's going to protect them, it's not. It's not borne out by the evidence. There's no evidence that neck alignment predicts future neck pain. Now, does that mean you shouldn't ever cue neck alignment? No, of course. You should cue alignment in every exercise. I mean, that's what Pilates is, right? So it's not about not saying like you should never cue people's position, but just don't attach it to the idea that you're somehow protecting them by putting them in a certain position or avoiding a certain position, because it's just not true. So both things can be true at the same time. It can be true that alignment doesn't predict injury, and it can also at the same time be true that it's valuable to cue alignment for other reasons, right? Which, like, for example, going into flow state is a very good benefit of focusing on your technique. So I'm all for cueing position and alignment, and I'm all for the neck being neutral in certain exercises, like in a plank. Great, have a neutral neck. That's where it's meant to be. When you're doing spine twist and you're sitting vertically, the neck should be stacked vertically, like that's part of the movement. So I'm not trying to discourage you from ever having people in a neutral spine. I'm not trying to discourage you from cueing neck alignment. But what I am trying to, I guess, discourage you from is telling people that certain positions or loads are bad or dangerous for the neck. When I say certain positions, like, of course, if a semi-trailer ran over your neck, that's bad or dangerous, right? That's a lot of load. But the loads that we're typically likely to find in a Pilates class, like doing shoulder bridge with your headrest up, are just way, way within the envelope of what is completely safe for anyone who doesn't have osteoporosis, essentially, or some other kind of substantial pathology of the neck. So I guess, neck pain is, what I want you to take away from this, what I take away from this research and from this most recent study from 2025 on text neck and cervical flexion posture and neck pain is that, neck flexion is normal, safe, and unavoidable in real life. We do it all the time in real life. And, load is not harmful. Insufficient capacity leaves us open to injury. So therefore, progressive neck loading through range builds resilience, just like in any other body part. Neutral cues can be useful for awareness, for entering a flow state, for building skill, but they're just not useful or helpful for protection. In fact, they can be counterproductive. So, to foster and support adaptable, resilient, confident humans with the minimum amount of neck pain, load their necks through range progressively, starting with what they can tolerate and building it up gradually over time. Don't avoid end range flexion. Don't avoid loaded extension. Don't avoid loaded flexion. Just build up their tolerance gradually over time. The neck is not special. It's just like any other body part. It's made of the same tissues. It adapts like every other body part. If you want pain-resistant people, let them move their necks. Load them deliberately, progressively, gradually. Help them get stronger. Don't instill fear in your clients. Don't fear loading the neck yourself. Think of it like the biceps or the abs. It's just muscles and bones and ligaments and tendons. They all get stronger when loaded over time. Okay, dear listener, that's all I got for you today. hope you found that relaxing and it put you to sleep, or I hope you found it stimulating and it woke you up and you're punching the air right now, or maybe you just found it mildly interesting or entertaining. I hope it brought you joy in some form. Much love, and I'll see you in the next one.